Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Don Larry, and if you are new to my channel, you are welcome. In this video today, I'll be showing you how to make an off-shoulder blouse, and this blouse is going to be a fitted blouse, and we're going to be padding it as well. So to get started, we are going to be drafting out the pattern on the pattern paper, and then after that we're going to be cutting and sewing with the fabric. So to draft the pattern, we are going to be needing the three basic sets block, which is the basic sleeve block, the front and the back basic bodies. And for the pattern, we are going to be needing a pair of scissors, marker, ruler and French curve. So for the fabric, you are going to be needing your fabric. If you are padding it, you will need some padding or wadding, and we are going to need lining as well, then zip and another pair of scissors for the fabric. So guys, let's get started. We're going to be starting with the front bodies, and what I have here, as you can see, is a dartless front bodies. So I've created the neckline, the shoulder slope. I'm yet to create the armhole curve, and I've drew out the upper chest line, the bust line, the under bust line, the waist line and the hip line. So the only difference I have from these basic bodies is the under bust line. So all you need to do is to measure yourself from the shoulder line to your under bust, and then you're just going to include this horizontal line to your basic bodies. So once you've drawn out all this, the first thing we are going to be doing is to determine the neck depth for the off-shoulder blouse. So we are going to be altering these basic bodies in order to create the off-shoulder pattern. So for this pattern, I'm going to be using 5.5 inches. So once you've determined the neck depth you want for your off-shoulder, you can use 5 inches, you can use 6 inches, you can use 7 inches, depending on how deep or how low you want your pattern to be. So I'll be using 5.5 inches. So once you've marked this, the next thing you want to do is to create the neckline. And to create the neckline, you can decide to make it a straight neckline. So you're just going to place your ruler and square that horizontal line in order to create your neckline. But if you want to make it a curved neckline, just slightly curved, you can do that as well. And you can as well make it a sweetheart neckline. So I'm just going to use a curved ruler to create the neckline. So, and I'm just going to draw it like this. So this is what I'll be having for the neckline. So once you've created the neckline, the next thing you want to do is to place the dart. And for this pattern, we are going to be using a 2 dart series. So we are going to be using the normal waist dart combined with another dart. So it now depends on the type of dart you want for your pattern. And for the off-shoulder pattern, there are 3 possibilities for dart that you can use for the off-shoulder. So as you can see here, we have the shoulder dart. That one we run from the middle point of the shoulder slope down to the bust point. You can use the armhole dart, and that one is going to run from here to your bust point. And also you can use the neckline dart. So that one is going to be in between your neckline, this neckline, and it will run from there to the bust line. So it depends on the type of dart that you want for your pattern. So for this pattern, I'm going to be using the mid shoulder line. That is the classic shoulder line. So once you've decided the type of dart that you want to combine with the waist dart, the next thing we are going to do now is to start placing the darts. And we are going to be starting from the bust line. So on your bust line, you're going to divide your nipple to nipple measurement, and that is 4 inches in my own case. So if you're working directly on the fabric, you add half an inch to it. That will make it 4.5 inches. So on this pattern, I'm just going to mark 4 inches, and that same 4 inches, you will need to mark it on the waist line and then on the hip line. So once you've marked that, then you're going to square a line from the hip line to the bust line. So just like this, and then we need to input our dart intake. So whatever dart intake you want to use for your pattern, that is what you're going to be placing here. So I'll be using 1.5 inches. So at the under bust line, I'm just going to mark 1.5 inches. That is 0.5 inch at both sides. So I'm just marking that now. Then at the waistline, I'm going to mark the same 1.5 inch. So I'm just marking that now. And then on the hip line, you will need to go up by 2 inches on the hip line, just like this. And then at the bust line, I will come down by just 0.5 inch at the bust line. So you can come down up to 1 inch, and then I'm just going to connect all these points together. And this is what you will have. So now that we've created the waist dart, the next thing we want to do is to place the second dart. And just like I've said earlier, that I'll be using the shoulder line dart. So if you are using the shoulder line dart, all you need to do is to find the middle point of your shoulder slope. So in my own case, I have 4 inches for the shoulder slope. So 2 inches, that will be the middle point. If you are using the armhole princess line, all you need to do is to find the middle point of your armhole depth line, like this. So you're just going to find the middle point, like this, and then you can just draw it from there to the bust point. And also, if you are using the neckline dart, just like I showed you earlier, this middle neckline dart, all you need to do is just to extend this nipple to nipple line, you extend it to your new neckline, which is here. So you just extend this line, and then you place your dart. So by the time you sew it, it will give you your neckline dart. So I'll be using the shoulder line dart. And then once you find the middle point, all you need to do is to connect this point to your bust point. So once you've done that, the next thing you want to do now is to work on this new neckline. So we are not going to do anything again with this line. So we are going to be working on the new neckline. So whatever dart intake you want to have for your pattern, you will now measure it from here, from this line towards your center front. I'll be using 1.5 inch, and then I'm just going to mark that. You can see where I'm marking it from this line towards the center front. So just like this, and then I will now connect this to the bust point. So, and this is what you're going to have. So if you're using this type of line, your shoulder line dart, you're not going to distribute your dart intake to both sides of the dart line. All you need to do is just to mark from this line towards your center front, and then you input your dart intake. So I use 1.5 inch here, and I use 1.5 inch here. So once you've done this, so this 1.5 inches that we are going to be using for the dart, we need to add it back to the neckline, so that once we sew the dart, we're not going to be short of fabric. So you're just going to add that 1.5 inch, and then we need to extend this line. So you extend the line just like that. And then before we create the armhole cuff, we first need to create the side seam. So to create the side seam, you need to divide your bust measurement by 4. So my bust measurement divided by 4 is 9.5 inches. So this is 9.5 inches. So I'm just going to add 2 inches side seam allowance. So, and this is what I will have. Once you've done that, you come to your waistline. You divide your waist measurement by 4. In my own case, I have 7.5 inches. So this is my waist divided by 4. And this 1.5 inch that I use for the dart, I'm just going to add it back like this, and then I'm just going to add 2 inches seam allowance to the side seam, just like that. Then I will come to the hip line, and at the hip line you divide your hip measurement by 4. So my hip measurement is now 40 inches, so dividing it by 4, I will have 10 inches. Then this same 2 inches seam allowance, I'm just going to add it to the hip line, and then I will connect all these points together to the waistline and to the hip line. So just like this. Just like that. So once you've done this, then you now create the armhole curve. And the armhole curve for the off-shoulder pattern, it is not going to be as deep as the usual basic body. So we're just going to create a slightly curved for the armhole curved line. So this is how it's going to be. So just like this, it's not going to be as deep as the usual armhole curve. So that is what you will have. So we are going to be cutting it out, and before I cut it out, I'm just going to add seam allowance to the neckline. So I'm just add half an inch, and that is what I will use to turn the lining. So I'm just adding half an inch to the upper part. And then to the hip line, I will need to add hem line allowance to it as well. So I'll be adding 1 inch to the hip line. So just like this. And for the side seam on your hip line, you can just give it a little curve, just to give it a nice shape, just like this. So I'll be cutting it out now. So I'm just going to label this as 1, and this is the second panel. And for this second panel, when I want to cut on the fabric, I'll be cutting out 2 pieces for this second panel, and then for the center panel, we're just going to be cutting it on fold. So we cut the center panel on fold. We're going to cut 2 pieces for the side panel. So I'll be cutting it out now. To create the back bodies for the off-shoulder pattern, we're going to be using our basic back bodies. And as you can see here, I've just traced this out, and I've placed the dart for the back. So you can watch my video on how to draft a basic bodies block so that you can understand it better. And then I've added the zip allowance to it. So I mark 1 inch for the zip allowance. So that is just the difference between these back bodies and the one I have here. So now to alter this pattern, in order to create the off shoulder, just like we did for the front, we're going to mark, you will need to mark whatever you use for the neck depth for the front. So you're going to mark it as well. So I'll be marking 5.5 inches, just like I did for the front. And then once you've done that, then you create the neckline. It's going to be having the same neckline. So once you've marked this, you can use the front off shoulder pattern to trace the neckline. So because it's going to be having the same neckline, so I'm just going to fold in this seam allowance. So just fold it in, then you place your front, you place it on the back. So as you can see here, this is the neckline for the front. So I'm just going to use this to trace the back neckline. And remember that for the back, we're not going to be adding this second dart. So we're just going to be using only one dart, which is the waist dart for the back. So I'm just going to smoothen this mark point. And then this is the neckline for the back. And also you will need to add the 0.5 inch seam allowance which we added to the front, and that is for joining with the lining. So we are going to add it to it. So that is what I'm marking here. Then I will trace it out. Just like this. And once you are happy with this, the next thing is to move on to create the side seam before we create the armhole curve. So for the side seam, you divide your bust measurement by 4. So I have 9.5 inches, so I will mark 9.5 inches, and then I will be adding 2 inches which I added for the front side seam. So this is the 2 inches. And then you come to your waistline, divide your waist measurement by 4. So my waist measurement divided by 4 is 7.5. I will just mark that. Then this 1 inch that we use for the dart, we need to add it back. And once you've marked that, then you add your side seam allowance. So for the side seam allowance, you can use 2 inches, you can use less than 2 inches, you can use more than 2 inches, depending on the seam allowance you want for your top. So you come to the hip line, divide your hip measurement by 4. So I have 10 inches. I'm just going to add 2 inches seam allowance to the side, just like this. Then I will now connect all these points together, and then I'm just going to curve this a little bit, just like I did for the front bodies. The next thing we want to do now is to create the armhole curve. So just like I've said earlier, that the armhole curve for the off shoulder is not going to be as deep as the usual armhole. So we're just going to make a slight curve for the armhole. So before we cut this out, if you have a sway back, you will need to make a little adjustment to this back pattern. So if your back is slightly curved, that is what I mean by sway back. So you are going to make a little curve to this back pattern. So depending on how curved your back is, you can mark half an inch if your back is just slightly curved. If it is curvy, you can mark up to 1 inch. So I will be marking 1/4 inch, and that is 0.75 inch. So at the waistline, you will need to mark that. And once you've marked that, you will need to create a kind of dart shape. You can see the way the dart is like this. So that is what we are going to create to this pattern. So this is how you are going to create this in order to avoid bulging at the zipper area. And note that it's not going to affect your seam allowance as long as you put enough seam allowance to the side. So I'll be cutting this out. Now we want to make the sleeve for the off shoulder pattern. And to make the sleeve for the off shoulder pattern, the easiest way to go about this is to work on the basic sleeve block. So I'll be using my basic sleeve block to explain to you so that you understand it better. So to make the off shoulder sleeve, we are going to be reducing the cap height. Note that this is the sleeve head and this is the bicep. So from the bicep to the sleeve head is the cap height. You can watch my video on how to draft a basic sleeve block. So once you have this, we want to reduce the cap height in order to create the off shoulder sleeve. So the standard is between 2.5 to 3 inches. We're going to be measuring 2.5 to 3 inches from the sleeve head. you place your tape measure on the sleeve edge. You know, this is the allowance, so I'm not going to do anything with the allowance. I'll be measuring directly on the sleeve curve. So you place your tape measure here, and then you mark 2.5 inches. So depending on how off you want your blouse, you can make it up to 3 inches. So to create my own, I'll be using 3 inches, and then I'll be working on this pattern. So this is my basic sleeve, so I'm not going to work on that, but it's the same thing. This is what I use to trace this out, as you can see it. So I'm just going to mark 3 inches from the sleeve edge. So I'll mark 3 inches down like this. Then you will need to square a line from that 3 inches towards this curved part. So just like this. And we're going to be cutting this off in order to create the off-shoulder sleeve. So I'm just going to add 1/2 inch seam allowance to it, and then I'll be cutting this part off. And this is what I will have for the sleeve. Now that we've drafted out the pattern for the off shoulder, the next thing I'll be doing now is to cut out the dart. So I'm just going to cut out the dart. I will separate this center panel from the side panel for the front, and then for the back I'm not going to cut it out, so I'll just transfer the dart directly to the fabric. So for this, I will just mark for the front now. I'm just going to mark 2 inches here to serve as the guide, and then I will mark 2 inches up. So this will just serve as the guide for me when I want to join the fabric together. And if you are padding your blouse, all you need to do now to cut out the padding is just we are going to be cutting out from under the bust to the neckline for the center panel. So for this side panel, what I will do now, from the bust line, I'm just going to mark 4 inches, and that 4 inches is the same thing as my nipple to nipple measurement. And then I will just use my free hand to create a kind of curve to connect it to the under bust, and then I will connect that again to the neckline at this side. So this is what the padding will look like. So this is what the padding will look like for this side. And for the center panel, we are going to cut out exactly what we have from the under bust line to the neckline. So let's cut it on the fabric now. I've cut it out on the fabric, as you can see, and this is the back bodice. So I've cut out the lining as well. So you make sure that the lining is 1/2 inch shorter at the hemline, and it is 1/2 inch shorter at the neckline. And this is the zip that I'll be using. This is the front bodice, and this is the padding that I cut out. So I'm using a soft padding, and just like I told you earlier, that you're going to be cutting from the neckline through to your under bust. So that is what I have for this one. And also from here, you will cut out following this shape, and then you're going to be cutting out 2 pieces for the 2 pieces side panels for the front. So, and also for the front, you're going to be adding 1/2 inch seam allowance to the dart line, as you can see here. So you will need to add it to the side panel, and then you will need to add it to the center panel as well, because I did not add it to it while drafting the pattern. So this is the sleeve, and I added to the length of the sleeve of this pattern that I have here, and also I made the sleeve seam allowance to be 1 inch instead of 1/2 inch that I have on the pattern. So what we are going to be doing now is to join all these panels together. So we are going to be starting with the front. So for the front, we're going to be joining the 2 side panels to the center panel. So whatever you do to the front bodies, that is what you're going to do to the lining. So this is the center panel, and this is the neckline. So at the center panel, you're going to be attaching your padding to it. You place the padding on the wrong side, and then the side panels, you separate it just like I have here, and then you're going to place each of these padding, you're going to place it under each of this panel at the wrong side. So just like I'm doing now. So this is how it will look like. And the first thing we are going to be doing now is we're going to stitch these two together. Just use like 0.1 inch just to stitch it together. And then I will do the same thing to the side panel. So once I'm done, the next thing I will do is to place each of this panel. You place it on the center panel, and then you're just going to sew it to it. I will do the same thing for this side, and then exactly the same thing I will do for the lining. So for the back, I'm going to be transferring the dart to the fabric when I want to sew it on the sewing machine. So, and then I will just use the lining to turn it at the neckline. Then I will use the lining to turn it at the zip allowance, and then at the hem line. And once I'm done with that, I will sew the dart for the back, and then I will fix the zip for the back. So I will show you what next. So this is the front, and as you can see it, I've joined the side panels to the center panels. This is the bust area. You can see that it really came out nice. This is the wrong side of it, and then I've joined the lining together as well. So the next thing you want to do at this point now is to place the right side of the lining to the right side of the fabric. So you place the two on each other, and remember that the lining is going to be 1 inch shorter than the main fabric. So you place the two on each other, and then you're going to join it at the neckline, and then you will also need to join it at the hemline. So that is settled for the front. So this is the back. I've turned it with the lining, as you can see it, and I've also sewn the dart. So this is the neckline for the back, this is the right side, and this is the hemline. Also I've fixed the zip for the back, as you can see it here. So what I'm going to do now is to turn the neckline and the hemline of the front, and once I'm done with that, the next thing I will do is to place the front on the back. Then I'm going to use my measurement to shape it at the side seam. I've turned the front with the lining. As you can see, this is the neckline and this is the hemline. So the next thing you want to do once you've done that is to you place the front like this, and then you're going to place the back on it. That is right side facing each other. So, and then you make sure that you assemble everything together. So this is the neckline. So once you've assembled it, as you can see the hemline, you make sure the two matches each other. Then you're going to place your measurement. You're going to be dividing your measurement by 4. So you divide your bust measurement by 4. You measure whatever you have. So in my own case, my bust measurement divided by 4 is 9.5 inches. So that is what you will need to mark like that. Then at the waistline, this is my waistline, you can see the shape. So at the waistline, you will need to divide your measurement by 4 as well. So whatever you have, that is what you are going to mark. Remember that we've cut out the dart, we've sewn the dart. So all you need to do now is to input your measurement, your actual measurement. You don't need to add any allowance to it. Then at the hip line, my hip measurement is 40 divided by 4. I will have 10 inches. So you will just mark whatever you get there, and then you connect all this mark together to create your side seam. So that is what I will do at the sewing machine. And once I'm done with this side, I will flip the fabric to the other side. Then the next thing is to divide your measurement by 2. So I've joined the front and the back together, and this is what we have. So this is the back, and then I'm just going to turn to the wrong side. So this is how the wrong side will look like. So if you are happy with the seam allowance that you have, you can leave it that way, but if not, you can just trim it a little bit. So I'm just going to trim this, and then I'm going to use my overlocker for the raw edges. So I will turn it back to the right side. So once you are happy with what you have, the next thing now is to attach the sleeve to it. For the sleeve, I've stitched the upper part and the lower part of it because I'm not adding lining to it. But if you're adding lining to it, all you need to do is just to turn it with the lining. So the next thing we want to do now is to fix the sleeve. And then what you will just do is you will need to open it like this, and then you open your sleeve and make sure that the side seam matches with the seam line of the sleeve. So I'm just going to place the two like that. I will pin it down, and then this part you're going to sew it to the front. As you can see that it matches each other, and then the other part will go through to the back. So I will sew from the front through to the armhole, and then we're going to sew it through to the back. And then I will do the same thing for the other side. So guys, this is the final look of the blouse, and it really came out nice. This is the front and this is the back. So make sure you give your blouse a good press, and then you trim off any excess allowance. We've come to the end of this tutorial. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and also I would like to hear your feedback. If you are yet to subscribe to my channel, kindly do so, and I will see you all again in my next video. Bye.